This is a picture of the Deutsche Hermanos, the southern western end of Rio de Janeiro, the Twin Peaks, which you can see there in the back of the picture. It's where I am right now, and it's my excuse for not being in Neville Dale Terrace tonight. It was a very hard decision, I have to say, deciding whether to pass this day in the northeast of England or on the beach in Rio. Should it be the damp gloom of Durham in winter with those glorious winds fresh from the Russian steppe, a maximum of 5.5 hours of daylight in a language incomprehensible to anyone from south of the Humber? Or should I sacrifice my comfort and head for limitless warm sand, the opal sea, the proximity of 50% of the world's available supply of good-looking bottoms, the zing of the ice-cold caipirinhas, the sensuous rhythm of the samba? It was never going to be an easy decision. In the end, I couldn't ignore the fact that we'd paid for 2 premium economy seats, so I shouldn't be eating toast as I'm saying this, to come to Brazil, which cost almost as much as a train ticket to Durham. And it was also not easy because 70 is an important anniversary, and you, Carole, are not only my big sister, you're the person whom I've known the longest in all my life. I went to my first school with you, though the only memory I retain is one of you blacked up on stage with a spear as part of a native chorus. Among my early impressions was that you always seemed to be better at connecting with the world outside. Perhaps this was a girl thing. You were adept at making best friends, though all I can remember of most of them is their names, beginning with a girl called Lally. Is that possible? Another early impression was that you were always more worldly wise, though I've almost got over that by now. You knew things I didn't, and maybe that was because you always were and always will be 20 months older than me. From an early age you had views, not necessarily the same ones. There you are, I'm such a neat host and try and record things the same. Not necessarily the same as the ones you have now. In June 1953, when the present Queen was crowned, we decorated the bay window of our front room in Daniel Road, Truro, to celebrate. We hung up a string of flags, a relic of VE Day celebrations from 8 years before. You, I remember, were troubled that some of the national flags had no right to be there. The hammer and sickle of the Soviet Union, for instance. You hand-drew a Union Jack on a piece of paper and stuck it over the offending image. As time went on, you took a rather different view, if I remember rightly, of the hammer and sickle. You were more astute than I. I remember from those days in Cornwall that we sometimes had small change left over from paying for train fares to the convent school in Falmouth, which we both attended, and you grasped, as I did not, that those pennies, halfpennies and farthings could be used in the sweet shop and it wouldn't be noticed, and you knew which sweets were off ration. And big difference, you applied yourself to things. Ballet, for instance. Do you remember performing in a kind of 17th, 18th century costume in front of a bewildered audience at the lunatic asylum and Wells? You practiced piano, as I didn't practice violin, and congratulations on completing all your grade exams last year with grade 8, 6 decades after you began then. A fantastic achievement. And of course you read voraciously. You had all the Biggles books. In fact, you were up to speed on all the great fictional creations of Captain W.E. Johns. Do you remember his gentle acknowledgement of a life for women beyond the kitchen sink, Worrells of the Waff, and his anticipation of the coming of the Special Forces myth that was Gimlet of the Commandos? Of course, it wasn't only gender that separated our lives. Difficult to explain this to outsiders, the curious sub-tribal division that our mother created in the family, the Pewters and the Glubbs. You were a Pewter, and so was Peter, and I was a Glubb, as was Margaret. The names refer to the 2 principal characters in a strip cartoon in the News Chronicle, our mother's preferred daily. Colonel Pewter was an eccentric retired military man, and Glubb was a Neanderthal creature discovered in a block of ice who graduated into the Colonel's butler. Now, quite what I and Margaret had in common with a caveman, I don't know, but the idea took root, and in all kinds of ways we became a household of gangs, two-person gangs, which helped in the organising of the war games fought with broom handles, which I was always trying to arrange and you were always trying to avoid. Another truth, the distance between an 8-year-old boy and a near 10-year-old girl is far greater than the distance between a boy of 10 and a girl of 8. I was aware of your growing up and away from me, not least when my mother announced to us that you had acquired your first suspender belt, but perhaps that should be passed over quickly. Mother wasn't always very discreet about matters beyond puberty. It is an odd thing about sisters, or my limited view of them. It was hard to see them as others did. You and Margaret were, well, just sisters. I remember the aftermath of an inter-school dance between my Jesuit-run college and your nun-run school, Beaumont College versus St Bernard's Convent. Impossible not to think of these things as a sort of alternative sporting fixture. The score in this well-chaperoned instance almost certainly a 0-0 draw. Anyway, the following day I was closely questioned by the prefect who monitored our dormitory, a long boy called Murphy, who had attended this event and encountered yourself. And I was surprised and baffled. I mean, of what possible interest could my sister be to anyone? And it was only much later, attending old school reunions, I was forced to realise that many of my contemporaries remembered you rather better than they remembered me. And I see that had I but twigged this at the time, the fact that I was in possession of a very rentable asset, viz. The ability to control access to my sister, had I but worked out how to do it, I could have made my middle school years much, much more comfortable. Our lives became geographically separate, sort of, in the 70s. You went off to America. I remember going to lunch with you a few days after your return, sitting in a country pub not far from our parents. You made two astute observations. Firstly, how astonishingly green England was, and secondly, how hungry we always were as children. Our lives continued to be separated a bit by distance. You migrated up to Durham and Manchester, and we migrated south to Thames Valley, which meant that our encounters for a long time were largely confined to the Christmas family gatherings, occasions which were all too brief, and rather than a re-establishment of contact, became an opportunity for a renewal of hostilities. My wife Jo was totally taken aback by the burden of family Christmas dialectic, which proceeded thus: the bald statement, followed by the flat rejection, followed by the person abuse, and finally the flouncing out, and very occasionally the physical violence. Those decades in Durham have witnessed your conversion from home counties girl to northeastern lass. These were opportunities. There were opportunities up there for the pursuit of radical politics which simply didn't exist in South Buckinghamshire. You immersed yourself in the culture and politics of the northeast. Like Professor Higgins and Pygmalion, you claimed that you could identify 16 different dialects. You knew not merely whether the speaker came from Newcastle or Durham, but you could name their village of origin. I guess that may have had something to do with your expertise in foreign languages, a part of our mother's legacy which none of us really rejected. We finally got around to seeing the Pitman Painters in the theatre in Windsor, odd location, and inevitably it summed up thoughts of yourself touring the small villages of County Durham to deliver your WEA lessons. Your move to Durham did have the unexpected benefit that we had a reason to visit and discover a part of the world which would otherwise have remained unknown. Over the years have been a succession of pilgrimages which allowed first our grandchildren and then first our children rather, then our grandchildren, to discover the delights of Beamish Victorian village, the drama of Hadrian's Wall, the magic of the seals on the Farne Islands, the eider ducks around Holy Island, the thrill of hide and seek in Warkworth Castle, the tang of Craster Kippers, and of course the grandeur of Durham Cathedral itself. These were journeys of discovery for the kids. And let me recall two memorable moments from visits of our grandchildren. The first was the sight of Carole bell ringing, she and her team on a Sunday morning in a medieval church tower, moving rhythmically, the ropes riding up and down, their gaily coloured ends slipping through the hands like so many magic snakes, and the children watching mesmerised. Great memory. And the second one, a unique sort of a memory, Great Uncle Gareth's utterly unforgettable lesson to the grandchildren in how to dispose of the inner bladder of an empty wine box on a balmy summer evening on the patio at the back of Nevilledale Terrace. This process began with Gareth inflating the bag. He then proceeded to place the silvery pillow on the flagstones. Finally, he poised himself and hopped onto the balloon with astonishing results. It did not, as he had confidently hinted, burst or explode. It behaved as a mini trampoline, to the amazement of his young audience and to the bewilderment of the reader of English at Durham University. Gareth was propelled sideways so that he landed on his face on the patio. The kids were open-mouthed by this outcome. One didn't know whether to laugh, groan, offer sympathy, or just be, completely astonished. Gareth was now, after his brief flight, lying groaning on the patio with Great-Aunt Carole like the widow in a Greek tragedy draped across our hero, demanding to know if he was all right. Now, you have to remember that this all began with the emptying of the wine box, and that perhaps explains the quite emotional response of my sister, and the fact that, in a useful sense, Gareth appeared not to be feeling too much pain. Carole, this has been rather a rushed statement. As always, I'm about to go on a long journey and I haven't finished packing yet. Joe is outside waiting for a car to appear to take us to Heathrow Airport in about 4 minutes' time. So forgive me if I've gabbled this. So sorry we can't be there, but it's an excuse for us to come up to Durham at some point fairly early in 2014 and share, and enjoy seeing you again. Best of luck. Congratulations on getting where you've got to. And thank you for being my sister for 68.5 years. Bye.